Hey all. So the previous talk was canceled, or didn't happen. So you'll be having to deal with me early. Sorry. So thank you for joining me for Engineering Better Design Relations. To get started, I am not an Android developer. Surprise. I'm a senior UX UI designer at a company called Funware. We do all kinds of things across the mobile ecosystem. But over the last 10 years or so, I've been an interactive designer. And that's allowed me to work with multiple developers across many platforms. And doing this has really taught me and learned how important that designer-developer relationship is. And how important it is for that final project. And that's kind of what I want to talk to you all about here today. There's usually a barrier between the two, which I feel that really shouldn't happen. For example, how many of y'all have ever kind of thought something like this, or heard or said something like this, maybe to your designer, to yourself, or posted it, asking, what format is this? Why are you giving me this? Is this iOS? But you know, it's not just developers, it's also designers. You might hear, why can't you just do this? You don't know what the lighting's not right. Or what is that thing you just told me? So it's both sides. But again, it does not have to be like this. There's some things we can do just to learn how to work together a little easier. And first, as an introvert, collaboration can be difficult. Just working with each other can be a little difficult and intimidating. So get over that anxious feeling, clear the air, and just breathe. Because, most importantly, we all have a common goal. And that's, we're both here to make great products. As a designer, I care about making the best user experience that I can to delight the customer's users. And I know as developers, you care about that too. So we should all strive to this together. We're all on the same team, we're not against each other, and we need each other to complete this job. It's a bit of a symbiotic existence there. I need to design the experiences, and I need you to develop them. So it's mutually beneficial. It's not one-sided. Because not only are we here for a common goal, and it is a job, and it makes each other's jobs and lives a little easier. And to do this, it's cliche to say, but just showing respect to people will give you respect in return. And then understand that everybody is at a different point in their career. Maybe you're working with a junior designer. Maybe your designer has a different knowledge base because they're a designer. And then everybody has different skill sets. I understand that even amongst the engineers, each of them are proficient in certain things and not so much in others. I've learned how to work with them and know which developers that I can more trust with UI and others that might need more exact specs. Which again, this is not a bad thing. It's just how they work. And then take the opportunity to learn and teach. Because if you're open to learning, then we can make even better products. So You can invite your designers to tech talks. Whether those are internal, invite them to a developer conference, maybe. And discuss what you're excited about. Tell them what you're working on, maybe, and how it can impact design. And we will do the same in return. Maybe there's an interesting design topic that will benefit development more. And also there's opportunities to mentor. Mentors don't have to be in the same role. So if you find that you have a more junior designer, take them under your wing and teach them about Android. The worst that can happen is that they can fall in love with material design. So after we're respecting each other and learning, that brings to the point that we really need collaboration because it leads to better products. More importantly, collaboration between different roles leads to better products. You need those different ideas because real collaboration bounces and builds off each other. If you're doing this with just engineers, then you're limiting that breadth of ideas and understanding. And from here, you can really push what's possible. Because again, you need that understanding. And also to take into account concerns from each other. For example, battery performance can be just as much of a design problem as it is an engineering problem. And type can be just as much a developer problem as it is a design problem. So as a designer, if I'm not considering how a user's battery is going to be drained by a new feature, or maybe the UI is intensive, then I've designed a bad user experience. And as an engineer, you need to convey those concerns to your designer. And if you're doing it in a constructive, respectful manner, they will listen to you, and they will, in turn, relay their concerns too. Because knowing is half the battle. Also realizing that there are different points to what each role considers QA or done. The idea of feature complete is going to depend on who is working on it. From a designer, it's the dreaded phrase, pixel perfect. But from a developer, it might just be the functionality. And for QA, that's going to be documentation. All three of these are correct, though. And it's easy for a designer to get annoyed why maybe the margins are 12 dp off. But I have to take a look back, look at the perspective of what's happening. All the content is in there, the page is scrolling, maybe they've even added a little animation on the icons. That's kind of magical. So from there, it's not such a big deal. And it's just a Jira ticket away from being fixed. So now that we've discussed why collaboration is important between the two and some problems, let's talk about what can hinder that collaboration. The first is process. And process can be a bit daunting. It's this big overarching word that really controls how we work. But process should really facilitate how we collaborate, how we work together. So both as designers and engineers, we can think about this more strategic with a strategy. We can analyze it and to evaluate our process and how we work. For design, this is called design thinking. So here we can find the pain points and then use that to refine our process. But first, and the big one, I want y'all to talk to each other. Raise your hand if you know your designers' names or have a conversation. That's great.
You have names.
Yeah. I know this is mind-blowing advice, But this is where we have to start, really. There's often times where I'll get a question about, why isn't this working? Or what do I do in this situation from another designer? And I have to ask them, did you talk to your developer? What did they say? And I'm met with a blank stare. Just go ask them. They're not going to bite you. So beyond that, you can then realize if that's not a blocker, or maybe it is the blocker there, then you can find your pain points. And you can break that down by first finding how do you feel? How does it feel just to work in your day-to-day? How does it feel to work with your designers or any department? And then make a note of where kind of you get that feeling of this isn't right. Then, how do others feel? So you can do some user research on your coworkers. Send out a survey. At Funware, the process was not working very well. So this is what I did to kind of start that process of changing the process. I sent out a big survey to each department, to not only the engineers, to QA, to the sales and marketing departments, to really see how they felt for working with the creative teams. And then you can also, if you want more in depth, set up one-on-ones with each other. So afterwards, and kind of the last thing to do, is look at tools. This is usually the most exciting point to looking at process, and most of the time people jump into it. But it's something that you should look at last, because you need to find those pain points. You need to find the problems to then find the solutions. And tools are usually a solution. So first, there's your communication tools. For example, we used to use Skype, but then we switched to Slack because of the nature of how our teams and projects are set up. And then there's the designer-developer tools. It's like Simply, Zeppelin, and now Gallery. We use Simply because we found it best fits our team. There's also tools like Figma now, which are all around collaboration. This is actually a design tool that you can access and collaborate with. But you need to look at your budget, your team size, your aptitude, the time, and how you're all divided to figure out which tools will best work for you. And so now an example of putting this into work. So like I said, at Funware we had a bit of a problem. Dev handoff was really annoying. And I found out through talking to the developers, they felt the same way. In fact, even more so. So one of the developers I frequently worked with, we set up a one-on-one, and we kind of asked why this was happening. We broke down what tools we were using and what the process was, and we realized we used Basecamp for assets and materials, which Basecamp is a terrific tool for project management, but was not working out for what we were using it for. Threads would get lost with assets. We would post in batches. And so people would have to post new threads asking where things were. And it just didn't facilitate that collaboration. And it kind of stuck us into this waterfall. So after finding our pain points and asking, and then finding the problem, we looked at solutions. We could share our creative Dropbox with developers, but that could create a problem for the creatives. They're sharing our creative source files. We could commit directly into the code base, into the repo, but the devs were a little wary of that one. And then we decided, well, why not use that developer tool? We could easily learn how to use Git, and some of us already did. So that's what we did. We created a creative repo. So our creative repos live on Bitbucket. And we can use this for any resources that we need to hand off to our developers. We can use this for assets that maybe Simply or Zeppelin can't generate, like vector drawables. I can hand off a color file or Lottie files, anything that's needed. And they can be updated, and they are able to pull them just as they are able to pull anything else. So after you've looked at the process, a common language is sometimes the fault. And this can be broken down a little bit too. First, what do people do? Our job titles are part of our common language. They can depend on where you work, on what, for example, type of designers you have. You might have UI designers, you might have UX designers, production designers, motion designers. So knowing which ones to go to will save you a lot of time. And again, it's respect. It's very frustrating when someone wanders over to your area of the office and asks, "What do y'all do?" Then, learn your designer's process. So this is your designer's language and what they call things, kind of. So you can figure out the difference between a wireframe or prototype and a comp or mock-up. There's oftentimes that you'll get, why is all the layout gray? Well, that's a prototype, so don't make everything gray. Compared to the final mock-up, it's much different. And that's when you know you can do the functionality with using the prototype, and then all the UI using the mock-up. And again, it's saving time, making you more efficient. And last, just the name of stuff. You may have gotten designers that kind of like floaty buttons or swipey tabs. We work, since some of us do work across multiple platforms, it's a lot to remember, really. So maybe class names are just not common use for us. Maybe you have designers that are more technically skilled and are okay with using those things. We also have to work with customers, and that can be an even bigger range. And then the UX guidelines say even another thing. So kind of come up, depending on your culture, you can decide if you want to use, say, what's in the material guidelines or the human interface guidelines for each respective platform. But at least it's a base to start with. So now that you've kind of looked at your process and using a common language, knowing how to talk to that designer and giving them feedback, it's always kind of a difficult subject, because we have developers that will sometimes even be a little bit too enthusiastic about this, or maybe too timid. So remember, critique is part of the design process. It's part of, if you have a designer that went to design school, then that was a part of our grade. So, and we also take into account that we are not our designs. So you're not critiquing us, you're critiquing the actual work. And critique can be good, both good and bad, but it's an opportunity for everyone to improve. So here's a few guidelines. First, no using I like or I don't like. These are hollow words, they personalize feedback, and they're not constructive. Just removing these can really change what you use to give that feedback. And two, remove your feelings from the review. Again, this is not a time to take out your work frustrations on a design. And three is you have a unique ability to give technical reasoning in this feedback. Even for us designers, having that technical backup and knowledge really helps us communicate not only our designs, but if a customer is having problems with our design reasoning, they're usually there if there's a technical reason why something is done. And again, an opportunity to learn. And last, you are not the user. Keep in mind that as a developer, you are already very much more tech savvy than the average user. So a good resource here is if you have personas for your product, or the brand, go check out the personas. This can help you empathize with the actual user. Okay, so now we know how to give feedback. We refined our process, we're using a common language, and we really understand the benefit of collaboration. Let's look at those quotes from earlier. So first, developers being respectful of maybe they didn't realize something, and saying what exactly they need, and then giving an opportunity for the designer to learn something more. And of course, respecting time. And it's the same for the designer. Asking, maybe there was just not enough scope to do something else, or asking them to define something, and showing interest in maybe a new topic they found out about. So of course, this can't be done, collaboration can't be done alone. So I really encourage you to kind of get out on your own company, talk to other people, of course, introduce yourself to the designer, set up some one-on-ones, and happy collaborating. I think so. So we do have time for Q&A. Y'all have questions. Stacy?
Okay. So you actually mentioned that sometimes developers can get a little too into this. I found that some designers like to keep a boundary, and how to figure that out, or what are some questions you can possibly ask as a developer to kind of know, a little bit more about their personal boundaries when it comes to that stuff, or to make it so that you don't hurt anybody's feelings, or and provide the most effective feedback. What are some kind of,
as far as feedback, or just in
to
general?
kind of get into that relationship, right?
Introduce yourself first. I mean, a lot of times you do establish a relationship, and then kind of talk to them like we're all human. We're both, so there shouldn't be that barrier. I mean, they're your coworkers you see more every day. So I would just say start a conversation with them about anything, really. And then for feedback-wise, if you don't feel like they're comfortable with it, then you can set up a review. That's always, because then you kind of give the mental mindset of this is review time, we're going to get feedback. And then, because nobody wants unexpected surprise feedback. That's kind of like the worst feedback there.
You mentioned using Git for handoffs between designers and developers. Which tool do you find your designers are having the easiest time using Git?
We use Bitbucket, so source tree is our.
I often have really simple design questions, like I'll get it, and I'll ask, what color is this button exactly, or it's in the wrong file format, can you give it to me another one, I need 3 of these, simple one. Those are, I think, like really small and impressive things that designers can figure out their flow or whatever they're doing. And if you come up with a strategy or any thoughts around like super simple things that designers can do to make that process more easy.
Yeah, those type of things, it's always, again, just talking to each other on a regular basis. We usually have a Slack channel for that kind of thing. We'll have like a main Slack channel for a project, and then we'll have a kind of a dev Slack channel, and then our dev managers will even invite the designer into that channel. So the devs can ask direct questions if they don't want to send a direct message to them. But that works for simple things like, hey, can you make this button red? And then, yeah, sure. And then if it's an asset, then if it needs to be recommitted, then we post all the updates. Yeah, but it's just a matter of just asking. If it's a lot of kind of little changes, then that's usually a problem with the process or something. Maybe something was not communicated correctly, or there's still kind of design. The design might not be finalized and approved. So it kind of depends on the situation there.
Very good. So, as a developer in a school team, designer usually has to decide for a long time, but let's say iOS, and then developers kind of bridge the gap and try to figure out how to just get design. How do you think, and what can the developer do to make the design and easy for like figuring out the differences between specification?
As far as kind of they know iOS and then they try to teach them.
So that the designer usually still just sort of some
Yeah, I mean that's very common at firmware. Actually, we work on very small teams. It's usually 1 or 2 designers at most per project. So we're oftentimes doing both with platforms. For that, it depends on the project. Sometimes, most of the times, we'll do iOS first, and then we will just have that scoped in for that extra time, like iOS this week. And then that's another matter of scoping and timeline, because you'll need to kind of stagger out your developers. They'll be on a different project and they'll come in. So that's where it comes into. But on like much larger teams or something, then you can do the designers hand off to each other, or why not?
At the end of the day, when you hand off, you have 2 sets of designs, one for iOS and one for Android, or is it just one set iOS next?
Yes, we do have, for custom projects, we have 2 sets. So we'll have our iOS prototypes and comps and specs, and our Android comps and specs, and then repos for each one. Or they'll be in the same repo, but they'll just be under different directories. I think so.